Sudoku are Japanese board games. There are two types. One type resembles backgammon, and the other resembles what Americans know as Chutes and Ladders. Originally, Sudoku were used for gambling purposes because of the look involved, but it evolved into a game for entertainment purposes after being replaced by easier gambling games. For the purpose of this assignment, I am focusing on the latter type of Sudoku, the ones that resemble Chutes and Ladders. The goal of this assignment is to answer what is early modern Japanese visual culture. I will answer this by analyzing Sudoku using visual culture studies. Specifically, I believe that through the lens of visual culture studies, Sudoku can be assessed like maps. Visual culture studies also allow us to analyze and interpret a huge range of visuals that may have been glossed over by art historians. It is important to note that these visuals also include the invisible. Yes, the things that you cannot see can also be as significant as what you can see. Politics, power, social status, the viewer, players. When analyzing Sudoku, some of these factors may be significant even if we cannot actually see them. We can also ask, what isn't included? What was left out? What was added? Using visual culture studies, we'll be interpreting Sudoku and comparing them to early modern Japanese maps. However, Sudoku are not just limited to early modern Japan. The Chutes and Ladders version of Sudoku has passed on through time. For example, in the 1980s, there was a TV game show that aired in Japan which was loosely based on rolling a dice to travel around the world and answer trivia questions. Let's take a look at a commercial for such a show.
クイズ番組言うても普通のクイズ番組はない。お井上さん、天下りどんな番組やと言ったなら物知りだけでは飽きまへん。サイコロ振って運をつかまな。才の目一つで世界一周。モンロー主義。ただしがっくり年にはご用心。もうかわいそう。日曜夜7時スリル満点のクイズ番組世界一周すごろくゲームこの乾弘明がご案内いたします。
Also, Japanese children still enjoy Sudoku-type games today. Even in America, children still play Chutes and Ladders, so these games are not limited to Japan. Many cultures have variations of their own. I believe that the variations are due to or are affected by the visual culture of the people. It's obvious to state, but the Japanese versions are clearly visually different than other versions, even though they may share the same rules. The players also vary as well. Since we are focusing on early modern Japan, we have to look through the gaze of a Japanese person from that period. Also, the players were actually grown adults and not children, which is another variation with modern day. As much fun as these games were, I believe that Sudoku can be considered more than just games. Taking a look at some from early modern Japan, they are very beautiful works of art which contain images ranging from landmarks, buildings, natural formations, and even various types of people. I'm going to mainly focus on Sudoku which are based on physical locations since they are evidently more closely related to maps than ones based on people. And thanks to visual culture studies, we are able to look at these Sudoku and really delve into them. We can follow along from start to finish and envision what it is like to play the game. We can imagine who created it and for what reason. Why did they pick the places that they did? Why did they omit a few places? We may never know these answers unless we can ask the creators themselves, but by looking at them from a visual culture studies perspective, we will hopefully also discover what early modern Japanese visual culture is. I believe that Sudoku can be read like maps. Therefore, since visual culture studies allow us to read maps, I'm going to apply semiotic methods to an early modern Japanese kind of visual culture artifact, printed board games, and see what I can learn about that visual culture. Sadly, I'm not an expert in cartography and my Japanese ability is certainly not equal to an early modern Japanese studies historian, but I think if I can give a brief introduction to Japanese maps, I can apply some of that knowledge to Sudoku. We can start by looking at various maps and comparing them. By doing this, we can see the effects that the invisible forces have. Here's an example of a map which I believe was created to show the farm plots of various families. Rivers are included, as well as some village names and mountains. Clearly this map was used by someone in the government that would need a map to see the division of land. Notice how there are not many labels for the bodies of water and the land across the border is just blank. We can compare this map to another map. This map has another purpose. While I am unsure of the background of who commissioned this map and for what exact purpose, it is clear that this is not used as a reference to determine which farm plots belong to who and where those plots are. There is a lot of vivid illustration and more labels. The landscape is a lot more discernible with clearer mountains, rivers, and even foliage. What I'm wanting to take away from these two examples is that maps are affected by many variables, and it's this relationship that forms a basis for our understanding of visual culture. Visual culture studies tell us that maps are really subjective. During this time, maps were originally commissioned by the government so they'd be able to tell where the borders between certain locations are in order to divide power and have a record of it, and the general direction of certain locations, perhaps so they wouldn't get lost and have an idea of the entire empire. So, for this type of map, one aspect of the visual culture is the fact that the government officials decided what they wanted to be mapped and didn't have things that they didn't believe to be important included in their maps. The politics and power affect this type of map. Yet there were other maps that included different features as well. They may not have been designed with the same goal as the other maps, but they are still subject to the same ideology. What are they hiding? All of the maps try to be objective, that is, they have a certain goal in mind. Whether to show the way to get somewhere or show the borders of land, maps are an attempt to visualize reality. It's impossible to visualize reality completely. First of all, the land and people are always changing. Maps are an attempt to visualize an area at that point in time, but they become outdated whenever there is a change. Looking at some maps, they don't include all of the nature. What about the animals? What about the weather? It's impossible. What they do choose to show and what they do choose to hide are based on the visual culture of that given time. How long have those buildings been there? How long were they there? Did ownership change? How about any construction? I'm sure these factors also changed over time. Therefore, if we look at Sudoku in the same light, we can create an idea about what early modern Japanese visual culture is. These Sudoku also lack the ability to include everything in nature. They attempt to create visualization, perhaps a trip from Edo to Kyoto, but they are even more simplified than maps that they could be based on. That is understandable because these games were not used as maps but used for entertainment purposes, so it wouldn't be practical to include everything like a map would, such as farm plots. However, there are still many striking similarities between maps and Sudoku. The method used to label places in Sudoku strongly resembles the same method used to label some Japanese maps. It is a box with the name of the place and it is colored. In some places, the colors match across Sudoku and maps. I found that to be compelling evidence supporting my case that Sudoku could have been based off other maps. I've come up with another idea that could help us identify what early modern Japanese visual culture is. Take an image of a building in a map and a Sudoku, like a temple, and show it to a random person on the street. Chances are, they do not know what it is. They may be able to identify that it's a building, but they may not know what type of building it is. If you show it to a Japanese person from that time, they are more likely to understand that image. This probably explains why signs from maps could transfer to Sudoku. It makes a Sudoku clearer to follow. It's this background knowledge, this understanding of signs, that gives the Japanese people of this era the ability to play the game with ease and follow along. While someone like me would have difficulty, the signs are part of their visual culture. Another interesting similarity is the legend. Maps generally have a legend to understand the signs included in the map. Sudoku also have a quasi-form of legends included in order to follow along with the game. These legends could either be included partly on the Sudoku or in the player's minds. Maybe they are already familiar with the signs due to experience with maps, and this knowledge passes on to understanding Sudoku. If Sudoku were not meant to be read like maps, then they wouldn't share as many of the same characteristics. Also, if a legend is required to understand the signs of a map, then the rules of play Sudoku kind of act like a legend since the rules define the way the game is played. Interestingly enough, visual culture studies lets us analyze other versions of Sudoku as well. There are Sudoku that are based on people and not actual locations. It is hard to follow these without translating them, but they still exist today as well. The Game of Life is actually a popular game in Japan after being imported from the West, but it is still a Sudoku type game. The Game of Life is a modern example of a Sudoku game that is based on people in order to illustrate various life events. Much like how maps and map-based Sudoku attempt to create a visualization of real locations, Sudoku games based on people attempt to create a visualization of the human life. Again, it is only an attempt because it isn't possible to include all the events of a person's life, so the creator has to decide which events are more important for the purpose of the game. One famous example is the game based on women's professions, known as Onna Kyokun Shusei Sudoku. You start out as a young girl who moves up through different professions to reach the top and win the game. Depending on the roll of the dice, they can end up doing many different things. There are a lot of phases in a woman's life, and the profession is one aspect of it, but for the purpose of the game, it's only practical to focus on these professions since it's impossible to include everything, just like it is impossible to do so in other map-based Sudoku or actual maps. While these versions, known as Shusei Sudoku, do not typically show travel locations but focus rather on life stages, they seem to be more of a diagram since they lack any sense of topography, but I think they are a representation of a human life. Maps are diagrams of topographical locations, but these Sudoku are diagrams of the human life. If maps are a visualization of reality and map-based Sudoku are an extension of that, then perhaps Shusei Sudoku are a visualization as well. Men were also featured in these, and the players include both men and women. These Sudoku were an old version of the game of life, and the players enjoyed the role-playing aspect. A lot of research has been done about these Sudoku, and I direct you to Suzanne Formanek's article, The Spectacle of Womanhood, New Types in Texts and Pictures on Pictorial Sudoku Games of the Late Edo Period, in case you are interested. What this contributes to our understanding of visual culture is that the players like to play different roles, and the luck of the dice made it engaging because they wanted to know exactly what path they would take to the end. The invisible entertainment force is attributed to the early modern Japanese visual culture because it is relevant to that time and location, but it would have to be adapted to a different visual culture for it to be fun in another location. In conclusion, Sudoku can be read like maps. We can apply visual culture studies of maps to Sudoku as well. Just like maps, Sudoku pretend to be realistic, but they cannot include all aspects of nature. Whether based on existing maps and travelogues or based on something else, Sudoku also reflect some sort of power and ideology because it is up to the artist to decide what to draw, how to draw it, and how to incorporate it into a board game. Sudoku have icons just like maps, and some Sudoku even have a legend to aid the understanding of the game in the case of confusion, much like early modern Japanese maps or even current ones. However, Sudoku, just like maps, are a snapshot of that moment in time, molded by the invisible forces of power and politics. One of my goals was for my research into reading Sudoku as maps to open more doors for continued research. For one, I think these Sudoku need to be translated by a professional. Also, since there are hundreds of Sudoku and thousands of maps, it would be nice for someone to sort them and attempt to match them. It would be wonderful to find evidence of a Sudoku based exactly on a given map. A lot more research can be applied to Sudoku in general, and they deserve much more attention than I have given them. So I hope that someone can continue visual culture studies into Sudoku and hopefully discover some new and intriguing details, while also help to answer the question defining early modern Japanese visual culture. It is difficult for me to come up with a solid definition of early modern Japanese visual culture. I believe that visual culture is an amalgamation of invisible and visible forces of an object that defines its characteristics. These forces can include politics, power, social standing, money, color, science, and much more. It is not simply the analysis of the image itself, but also the analysis of the reasoning behind it and the analysis of the invisible. Therefore, early modern Japanese visual culture has to be the visual culture of that time, location, and the people. It is specific to not only the early modern era, but to the Japanese in Japan as well. Early modern Japanese visual culture has different characteristics than medieval European visual culture. It is a different time and location, and the people are different too. The maps and Sudoku that I have included are snapshots taken during the early modern period by the Japanese, and therefore they are subject to different invisible forces than the Europeans of the medieval era. Overall, it would be difficult to devise a complete answer to my original question due to all the complexities that it entails, but I attempted to answer it through the use of visual culture studies to analyze maps and Sudoku. Visual culture is the end result of that analysis. In this case, it was early modern Japanese visual culture. The invisible and visible forces work hand in hand to define visual culture, and early modern Japanese visual culture is no exception.